I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to Campfire Talk. This is where we sit around the fire, put our feet up with a cold drink, and let the conversation flow. Tom, did you want to have something to say before we get rolling?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to welcome everybody aboard. And hey, if you made it this far, it's only a few minutes into it, a few seconds into it. You know what to do. Click the like and subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already. And clicking the like button really helps us out. If you want to take it to the next level, you can do that on YouTube. In the description, we have a link to Patreon. And if you want to do that, you can support us for as little as $1 a month. So with that said, I'm going to hand the mic back to Will and the gang, and we'll go from there. All right.
Well, T's joining us this morning. He was on the show Saturday, and it's always a pleasure to have you with us. So you asked me a question last night about how I first met Renee Hinton. And we were chuckling about the Kokanee commercial because that's, if anybody wanted to know what Renee Hinton was like, that was him. That was the essence of Renee.
That was a really funny commercial, too. I wasn't expecting that because I didn't know what Kokanee was until I saw the commercial. And that was just hilarious. And I really loved what was going on in his camper behind him while he's standing there talking.
Yeah, because they asked him if Bigfoot would be interested in his beer, and of course he says, "Oh no," and he's straight laced and all this stuff, and the Bigfoot's in the trailer ransacking it for his beer. So, but that was Renee. He real straight faced. But how I met him, and I've told this a million times, but we first found tracks near my home back in 1972 when I was 14. And, we got made fun of. So 2 years later, when I had my first encounter with these creatures, direct encounter, we didn't talk about it to anybody except amongst my friends and I. And so one evening, my buddy John Adams and I were on, we were doing some kind of after school sports in the evening, either basketball or baseball or something. But so we were on the activities bus going home in the evening, and there weren't very many kids on it. Maybe by that time there was maybe half a dozen all spread out. So we were kind of by ourselves towards the back, and we were talking quietly. He was sitting behind me, and we were kind of talking about what happened, since it was only a few months after the event. And another of our friends, this guy Jim, he was a nice guy. He was just, he was short and people made fun of him a lot. So he didn't really have any friends except us. And he overheard us talking about this. So he scoots over and he says, "Well, can I interview you about this?" And I thought, well, Jim's the kind of guy that won't go anywhere. So I said, sure, I'll tell you. And didn't think much of it. So within the next week or so, he comes to me and he hands me these 3 books. They're, they're kind of like magazines, John Green's first 3 books. And I'm like, wow, I didn't realize there was stuff written on this, So I poured over the books over the next few months. And, when you're 17, you kind of absorb everything, something that really grabs your interest. So later that summer, I was napping, and it was probably late July, early August. And one of my sisters comes into my room and says, "Hey, there's 2 men here to see you." And I woke up and I'm kind of like, 2 men? I don't know any men, except my dad's friends or uncles. And so I slipped my barn boots on and I walk out the back door. Our driveway came around to the back of the house. Nobody ever used the front door. And lo and behold, there's Renee Hinton. I recognized him from the pictures in Green's books. And there was another guy named Dennis Gates from up north of Seattle, a place called Cedar Woolley. So Hinton introduces himself, and he asked me about what I experienced. So I told him, and I said, "Well, how'd you find out where I lived and who I am?" And he says, "Well, a friend of yours wrote to John Green." He says, "We've got a camp just north of here, a few miles, and we're down here investigating this Puyallup Screamer stuff. And he says, you should drive up and, to the camp. He told me where it was and, meet Green and some of the other people that were there. And I said, okay, sure. So they left. And I called a buddy of mine. John had a summer job, so he wasn't home. So I called another friend. I didn't have a car. So he came over and we drove up to their camp and spent a couple days there. And, I got to hang out with the Hinton. I followed him and Dennis Gates. They were armed pretty heavily, and they were out walking the roads all night long. So I'm, tagging along behind them, keeping it real quiet and scared, to death that we're going to run into these things at any minute out there. And, got to meet John Green and some of the locals and a state trooper by the name of Mark Pittenger, who'd seen the same creatures I did, incidentally. And, Hinton was impressed with the fact that I wasn't running my mouth. I was very quiet and following them around and paying attention. And he said he wanted me to stay in contact, and so did Green. They wanted me to be their eyes and ears in that region. So that's how I met those guys and how I got started in all this.
When did he pass away?
In 2001. He had prostate cancer.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a character,
so
that guy.
You met John Green too.
And I knew Bob Titmus, knew Grover Krantz. I knew a lot of those people, the original people.
Grover Krantz, yes.
Yeah, it's funny. I had to laugh. There was a video, and I can't remember who put it out recently. It was an old video, from 1989, I believe. And it was from over in Pullman, Washington. They were having one of those, the real conferences that they had back in those days, with Krantz and all the big names and everything. Not like the, the little merchandise selling events they do today. But I remember Krantz and I had a conversation on the phone. We got into an argument. And I can't remember for the life of me what the argument was about. But, Renee hated Grover Krantz with a passion. I mean, hated the guy. He used to say there was, Krantz had like a right above the center, between his eyes, above his nose, he had kind of a mole or something there. And he'd say that was, he says, Krantz might be a nice guy if he'd just shut up and not say anything. He said that was Krantz's start-stop button. He says, when Krantz starts, he says, when Krantz opened his mouth, somebody should just run up and push the button and everybody'd be okay. Everybody like him. So Renee was coming back on his yearly trip to Bluff Creek, and he always, we would go back and forth and visit each other every year. And he called me and he says, hey, I'm on my way. I'll stop by your house, tomorrow or whatever it was. And so when he stopped by, I was still fuming about the conversation with Krantz, and he perked him up right away. He says, I wasn't going to go to that damn conference, he says, but now I think I will. And I egged him on because I knew what the result was going to be. And so he went, and he says, I'll call you when I'm back home. So he called me a couple weeks later, and he was just laughing about all the hell that he raised with Krantz and basically shut him up on stage and the whole works. It was pretty funny.
Well, who are some people that are researching now? I mean, not counting people in this group right now that we're talking with, but who are some other people that you would trust? And
today?
Yeah, today.
Oh boy, I'll be honest. I don't have a lot of confidence in most anybody out there. I really don't.
Yeah, we were talking about that show, Expedition Bigfoot, last night.
Oh yeah.
That Maria Mayor,
Yeah.
Have you ever met her?
No.
But I get the impression that she's serious about it, and she's not, because whenever that guy always says something about orbs and
which is that the other guy? What's his name? We were talking about him too. The guy that sort of copied my bio.
Yeah, Russ. Yeah.
Yeah.
Russ is the apparently ex-Ranger type,
Well,
the first time when I saw
go,
him nearly kill himself on that cliff trying to rappel down, it was obvious to me that he had probably never done that before.
Well, it's interesting, his bio, like in the beginning, in the intro of this show, and Adam put that together for us, and he has he talks about, and they used the term when they read it, my 40 years of experience. I've actually done this for 50 years, a little over 50 years. And I'm an author. I don't put in my bio on my website, WilliamJevning.com, I didn't put in the bio that I was in the military. I didn't think it was relevant to this topic, even though when I enlisted in 76, I enlisted as an 11 Delta, which was an armored reconnaissance specialist, and in a year, it was 78 that they changed our MOS. I can't think what they termed it then. It was the management field.
It's 19 Delta, isn't it?
It's 19 Delta, right, which is cavalry scout. And, being a reconnaissance specialist really is kind of relevant to the topic, but I thought, that was a lifetime ago. That was, so I didn't add it into my bio. So, and I've published 9 books so far, and I'm working on number 10. So this guy, I looked him up. I thought, well, now that sounds kind of suspiciously familiar, this bio and all the details he's got, because he says, he's got 40 years of experience. He's a published author, military veteran. I'm thinking, okay, so I went and looked at his bio. Well, in the bio, he doesn't say what MOS he was. Could have been a cook, could have been anything,
Yeah.
If I were going to add my bio, military experience, I would put, I was a reconnaissance specialist. That's the relevance to the topic. But, I don't. I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just, in the bio, just giving information.
Yeah, exactly.
This guy's he's got 2 books, but they're works of fiction. And his experience amounts to, stories he heard growing up in Montana. So I'm thinking, well, it's pretty flowery looking bio, but there's really not a lot of substance to it. And then you said, I don't watch that show. So, but here's another point about the gal you talked about. The what is she? She is a primatologist.
Yeah,
right?
She actually discovered a miniature lemur in South America or something. Some undiscovered creature,
And Forrest, we talked about this. The big problem I've had with her is, like, one of the episodes they took primate pheromones, they put them in a drone and then flew them over a forested area and just sprayed it everywhere. Well, okay, now if you're a primatologist, you would already know, you should know, that number one, an unknown primate in North America is not going to recognize primate pheromones from some other part of the world, never having encountered them. And then secondly, it's a shotgun approach. So number one, they're just flying over, some portion of a forest. These creatures...
It was a big area, too.
These creatures cover a lot of terrain. And if you don't identify specific groups and their patterns, how do you know where to put something or even go look for them? So they're just spraying this crap helter-skelter everywhere, hoping they get something. They're doing a little recon, by fire there.
Yeah, well, and I think if you remember correctly, too, I had actually mentioned that, too, because I had seen that show, and I thought it was rather ridiculous. And, because first off, anything that is related to the sexual smells with primates is going to be pretty much, it has to be specific to that group. I mean, they're not going to, it's very unlikely a chimpanzee is going to respond to smells put off by a macaque or some of the kind of monkey, or even same vice versa with using human stuff. And that's why you always make that joke about the guys running around the women's bathroom collecting menstrual pads and stuff, discarded menstrual items. So they're not gonna. They might be interested in it because it's a peculiar smell to them, but as far as attracting them, no, I don't. It's not going to work that way. And but I will say, let me tell you this, T. Lemurs. She may have found a new type of lemur. I don't know. The lemurs are only found in Madagascar. So on the island of Madagascar is the only location for lemurs. They have a variety of lemurs there. In fact, that what's his name, Forrest, y'all probably know who I am talking about. He's a zoologist. He was actually born in Africa, but rather interesting character. He's done a few programs on Extinct or Alive, I think, and he was looking for a. They actually
I know
had
who
a
you're talking about, but I
packing-
can't think of his name. Yeah.
Is it Marzinski?
Well, the only reason I remember is because his first name's Flores too. So, he was looking for a pachylemur, which is a giant lemur that used to exist on Madagascar, and they actually had found remains of it, and it was those remains were dated at 1000 BP here, and they actually had determined that the death of that particular lemur was due to human intervention because one of the femurs was actually chopped off with something akin to a machete. So, this is where I really have a problem with a lot of people in Africa and Southeast Asia that eat our relatives. And that's literally what they're doing. They're eating our relatives. So, all primates are related in one way or another. And I just, oh my gosh, you know how I detest that. So,
hey, there was another.
I probably shouldn't get off on one of my tangents. So anyway,
there was another. I did see a clip from that show, Expedition Bigfoot, and I was going to give a little critique on it. The clip was they were out at night and they had a thermal sight. It was one of those that looked like a monocular type thermal sight, and they were looking out across this area, and there was obviously two elk or deer. Couldn't really tell which from the clip, and then to the right of these two animals, there was another heat signature that was pretty indistinct. So. I mean, I know they were alluding to the idea that it was a Bigfoot stalking these two animals. I mean, it could have been the butt of another elk in there. Who knows, right? But it was indistinct, and then after a few moments, it lowered and disappeared into the brush there. And of course, the guy, and I think it was the guy I was just talking about, this Russell guy. He was saying that, it looks like, and then you see the two animals look over in that direction, and that's about the time this other image disappeared. So they're alluding to the fact it was Bigfoot hunting the two animals, and the element of surprise was over, so the creature left. So
I saw that too, and that could have been an elk laying down.
Sure. Exactly. And if it was a Sasquatch, well, did you notice it was kind of a hillside? That would be a very poor place to ambush, and typically Sasquatches don't ambush animals in places like that. What they'll do is, if you know anything about the movement patterns of deer or elk, they'll come out of their bedding areas, and they'll have a corridor of travel. They go down to their feeding areas. And an ambush point, a perfect ambush point, is when they're traveling from point A to point B. And it would not be on a hillside like that. And there would be more creatures in the area. They would probably drive the game animals into the kill zone, which we see with chimps. They do the same thing. And you have individuals there waiting to close the door. So to me, that was just kind of it was a lot of guessing, a lot of swag method there. Without any real facts.
Well,
and did they
had another episode?
And did they go back?
Another episode where they had one on thermal walking away. Its back was like to the camera. It was like stepping over some fallen trees or something. And when you look at it on the thermal, you could see the outline image of it, but in the middle, it was just like a blurry red or orange. The thermal looked all wrong to me.
The question I have, too, is if you get something in a situation like that, the way to be sure of what it is you're talking about before sticking your foot in your mouth is to go to that spot in daylight and do a thorough search of the area, because there should be attendant evidence that goes with whatever it was you saw. I suspect, like with the elk...
Yeah, they never did that.
I suspect where the elk was, there probably would have been a bunch more elk tracks instead of, Bigfoot tracks.
Well, they took that thermal image and they supposedly sent it into some... locomotion expert, and he did all these computer graphics trying to show about where the legs were on the body and how it was moving, and it just didn't look right to me.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about things like that. I mean, if you're going to show people things, do some follow-up with it, and don't make such bold statements when you're not certain about what you're looking at or showing.
Well, I can guarantee you 2 elk are not going to stand there, even if they did realize, all of a sudden recognize that it was a predator coming up on them. They're not going to just stand there and go, oh, there's a predator, and just casually look at it. They would have, at that point in time, turned tail and run away anyway. So,
exactly.
I mean, they're not going to stand there casually looking at it. So, I'm pretty sure it was probably an elk just laying down.
That's kind of what I thought.
I remember seeing that episode, and I thought the same thing. I mean, I've watched a bunch of those episodes. It's not like a show that I watch regularly on purpose. It's usually when I'm flipping through and there's nothing else on, and I'll just sit there and watch that, if it's on. But the first time I saw it, I thought, this is a pretty good show, And then I think it was the next episode that I watched. It was when that guy almost fell down that cliff upside down, tangled up in his rope. And
now you and I were chatting last night about our experiences rappelling in the Army, and both had funny stories to tell about that.
Yeah, it's a dangerous activity, but if you're careful, it's okay. But things can happen, like what happened, what we talked about last night.
Oh, I was telling him a story about the first time we rappelled out of Huey's. And now we had done it extensively, of course, off the towers and off, at the mountain training camp from Fort Lewis and, off mountainsides. We've done it a lot. And you should do it a lot before you actually go out of a helicopter. So the first time we did, now I was wearing, because I'd crewed a tank in Germany, I got a tanker's jacket. And a tanker's jacket, it's kind of like, the flight jackets the Air Force have. They have, elastic. It's a waist-length jacket, and there's elastic around the bottom of it, elastic around your cuffs, and then also around your neck. So it's kind of all self-contained. There's not any loose flaps or anything. And one of my E4s, he was giving me a bunch of guff about, being a non-repelling MF and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, we'll see who gets to the ground first. And on a Huey, and I've never rappelled out of Blackhawks, so it's a little different procedure. But on the Hueys, you get one guy on either side of the helicopter, and you get out on the skid, and you get down in an L position, which means your legs are horizontal with the ground, and you're sitting in an upright position, right? And you've got your hand on your brake rope in the back, and your left hand on the guide, the rope that has tension on it. So you're getting ready to go, and then the person in the helicopter will go, point their hand at you and drop, and the other person drop. You can't go simultaneously, otherwise you come out of the helicopter and you swing down and hit each other. So one guy goes first and the other one goes. And, down we go. And this E4, he was wearing a field jacket, and the bottom of the field jacket got hung up in his snap link. So about 20 feet under the helicopter, he's dangling there, and I'm kind of laughing at him, not really paying attention. I'm zipping down the rope at 100 feet, pretty fast. And one of my privates was down there as my belay man, and he wasn't paying attention. So thank goodness we had our Alice packs on with our clothes and stuff in it, and it acted as a cushion because he let me bounce off the ground on my back. I was not a happy camper. So I said, okay, now we're going to trade places. You're going to rappel next. I'm going to be your belay man. So what it means to be a belay man is, if they're having trouble, you can just pull on the rope and it'll stop them. And so I'd let him go about every 10 feet or so. Then I'd swirl him around under the helicopter, and I'd let him drop again. So he was pretty seasick by the time he got to the ground. But,
Now, Will, was that the fast rope, or is that different type of procedure?
That's different, because you have a Swiss seat on, you're in a snap link.
Okay.
I have actually fast roped out of Blackhawks before. It's kind of like just grabbing onto a fireman's pole and sliding down. You don't hook into the rope or anything. You just hold on.
They're like 4 inches in diameter, aren't they? I mean, they're huge.
They make them out of parachute cord woven together, and that whole rope weighs oh God, it takes like 3 people to tote that rope.
It's got to be
several
pretty
hundred
heavy.
pounds, you know.
I never got to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, they trained us to do that. I didn't like doing it because you didn't have that safety of being hooked in.
Exactly.
You know, 100 feet.
You could have accidents. Well,
Yes, and we did have that. I mean, a lot of people would bite their tongue or bite their inside of their teeth when they hit the ground because you're going so fast, you know.
Yeah.
And
there isn't the control.
A lot of us would carry football mouthpieces in our pocket, you know, for when we would do that, you know, stick a mouthpiece in. That way you don't hurt yourself. I've seen broken ankles, broken, legs. Saw one guy slip loose and let go about 15 feet off the ground, and he messed his back up pretty bad.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
I got to go for an involuntary ride on a helicopter. Briefly, we were training new pilots. You know, we would in the Coast Guard. About 80% of the pilots come from the Army, because the Coast Guard goes to them and says, "Hey, look, you every day, with your training and stuff." And so anyway, we would get these pilots, and we'd have to train them on, getting the helicopter right up to the boat, and they drop a tag line down so it discharges the static electricity onto the deck. And it was a blustery day that day. I mean, we were getting like 40-knot gusts that would show up out of nowhere, and then they'd be gone. So this kilo's coming in, and one guy has to pull the rope down to make sure it doesn't get caught up. You don't want it getting hung up on valves and stuff like that on the boat, and you certainly don't want it getting sucked up by the rotor. That's bad. Yeah. So that's what I was doing, and all of a sudden one of the gusts came in, and and it's 1/4-inch polypropylene. It's just really thin stuff, but it wrapped around my thumb, and I was like, oh, it wasn't good. I'm sitting there, and all these thoughts are going through my head. I'm like, okay, well, this time of the year is when the great whites are out looking for the seal pups. So I'm going in the water, but they'll deploy a swimmer. Those swimmers are really, really, they're tough dudes. They go through a very stringent training. It's a special forces, segment of the Coast Guard. All these thoughts are going through my head, but the crew chief cut the line just before I went over the stern of the vessel. But pulled some new muscles and tendons out of my arms.
Well, it just goes to show the stuff we're talking about, in reference to this guy on that show, kind of having we'll just say difficult time rappelling. If you've been in the military and done it in the military, you do it a lot. And you're well trained when you're finished doing it.
Over and over again. Yeah,
over
absolutely.
and over. Yeah, so mistakes like that are pretty rare, actually. And how'd you describe him? I mean, just rappelling off a hillside. I used to have my own ropes and everything. I used to go do it on the weekends for fun because I enjoyed it so much.
I've still got some old ropes. I haven't used them in years, but I've got them in storage right now. Rappelling ropes.
Yeah, if you've done it a lot in the military, you really enjoy it. And it was, for me, it was a great recreational activity, but you get real competent doing it.
There's a place down here not far from where I live. It's probably about 15 miles from here. It's alongside the Chattahoochee River. Down below, another dam right down there, but there's a solid rock wall that's about 60 or 70 foot high. And we used to love to go down there because you could hike to the top of that hill and rappel down the cliff and then go back and hike, back up. We used to do that just to have fun, kill some time on the weekends,
I guess what I'm getting around to is maybe this guy doesn't have the experience he's claiming he does.
Yeah, he was 100% obvious to me. He looked like a friend of mine that we taught to rappel, and he was really nervous and scared the first time he started going over that cliff, and he did about the same thing. He slipped and fell and almost let go of the rope. We're telling him, hold on, just hold the rope tight. You won't go anywhere, But that's what that guy did. He stepped on some loose rock, and, that's not how you start off on a rappel.
No.
You get to a solid spot before you try to, go on down.
And you get your stance good and everything. And you should have good stability when you're getting ready to go.
Make sure your brake hand is in a good position.
Yep.
and make sure, nothing is hanging loose that might get hung in your D-ring, because that's what happened to the guy that rappelled out of the helicopter with us. On his on his left hand,
Oh,
his
his
guy
sleeve?
hand. Yeah, you know, he didn't have that little flap button on his BDU.
Oh boy!
And it apparently went up into the rope, and he said it started pulling his hand into the D-ring. So he snatched, and when he did, it just ripped his sleeve completely off his uniform.
He's lucky it tore. We had a
Yeah, that's what I told him. And if it'd been the thicker cloth, it was the ripstop kind, that's so called. You know, it's a lot thinner than the standard BDUs. And but if it'd been the thick ones, I don't think it would have ripped loose like it did.
No, we had I remember we were up at the mountain training camp one time at when I was stationed at Fort Lewis, and there's some pretty gnarly cliffs up there, and we were rappelling off one of these really, I mean, you didn't know there was a cliff there. I mean, if you were just walking around, I mean, this thing was probably, it was at least 100-foot drop straight down. And actually, it kind of curved back into the hillside a little bit. So when you were going down, typically you want to make your bounds going down a rock face. And you get into the middle of this, and there was nowhere to bound off from. You had to just keep dropping until you got to the next part of the rock face that actually came out to where it was parallel with the rope. But there was we had a West Pointer. West Point will send people out between their third and fourth year to do things with regular units, and we had this young guy with us, and he was a nice kid. I'm sure he made a good lieutenant, but very inexperienced. And he was out with a bunch of scouts who were pretty much the scandalous people of the military, And I'm heading down to get onto the edge of this cliff, and he's like, "Sarge, you look like you're an old hand at this." And pretty soon I vanished, going off the edge, and he was like, "Holy crap, where'd he go?" Because I was totally comfortable with doing it, and had lots of experience, and went off the edge of that cliff like it was nothing, and to me it was fun. I was ready to go back up, but we had other things to do, and so we were showing this kid the ropes. But it can be.
Will, did you guys ever do the? Because there's a mountain unit in the Army.
Yeah, the 10th
did you guys ever train? Yeah. Did you guys ever work with those guys?
I didn't. One of my men, when he PCS, permanent change of station, he went to the 10th Mountain, and he was pretty nervous because he didn't want to work that hard. But I think they were relatively new back at that time. That unit was so. I don't recall because I didn't really have any experience with them. We never trained with them. No.
Yeah, you look at videos, and these guys are, I mean, back in the day, back when they sold the Alice packs, but, they've got 50, 60 pounds of gear, and they're hiking up for miles and then doing the cliff thing and all that. It's like they work their butts off. That is not an old man's game. That's
no.
for sure.
But, kind of like I said, getting back to the Bigfoot thing with this show and these guys, it's, if you really pay attention, you can point out things that, kind of tell you whether they know what they're doing or that they don't know what they're doing. They might talk a good story, but proof is in their actions.
That's one other thing about that guy that caught my attention after he almost killed himself on the cliff. I got to noticing the pack that he carries. Now, that pack is a large, very large pack, and he's got it looks like it's stuffed to the gills with equipment. And when he sets up his campsite, it's like he's got everything there. So, I was in the infantry, and we spent a lot of nights living out of our packs, and we had our packs shaved down to the lightest weight possible.
Oh, yeah.
Because on top of what you carried with you, you had to carry ammunition, you had to carry spare ammunition for the machine guns. You had to carry, spare grenades for the grenade launchers,
tripods, all kinds of stuff.
You had quite a load you had to carry. So most of the time, I mean, we didn't carry tents. We had a poncho liner and a poncho, and we'd usually stretch the poncho up like a little awning shelter and roll up in our, poncho liner up under the thing if it was summertime. If it was wintertime, we had our big sleeping bags, but... Well, he doesn't count like he's had a military experience.
When I was with the Air Cav, I used to tell the guys we're carrying hammocks, a poncho liner, and your poncho. That's it. That's what you're sleeping in. And it was very effective, and it was lightweight. It worked great.
I got tired of being eaten up by mosquitoes at Fort Benning one year, so I was looking around at Ranger Joe's down there, and they had this it was from Vietnam. It was a hammock tent.
Oh yeah, they have the sides that are screened.
Yeah. Well, I saw that, and it was like $100. So I bought it, and at that time, $100 to an infantryman, that was a good chunk of money right there, But, yeah, so this was in the late '80s, and but that's what I used the rest of the time I was in the service. But I took the hammock cords off of it, and I'd carry a couple of tent pegs in my pack, and I'd just stake it out like a tent. I had 2 pieces of PVC pipe that I used for, poles to hold the roof up, right? Because it's only about 1.5 feet tall,
Oh yeah.
And that's what I'd crawl in that and sleep. I kept the mosquitoes and bugs off of me and everything.
Well, what I've learned about doing field work is I don't stay out there at night. Well, what we do, and Tom will tell you because we were out in Oregon in July, but smart money was, you get a hotel room, and we were running 18-hour days, but they were split up. We'd be out at, my policy is to be not in their hunting areas when they're there. Let them do what they're doing when they're doing it and stay away from it. You can go there when they've left the areas and go to their sleeping areas and search for evidence and things like that and recon the areas. But, we had a pretty busy schedule, but, sleeping out there with all kinds of nasty bugs and things, and I've still got a few bites that are healing from when we were out there,
Well,
yeah, go ahead,
we were
Tom.
sleeping in wooden tents.
That's
with
right.
Doors on them and a bathroom.
I just didn't see the need to drag a whole bunch of gear out there and, make a lot of noise, have a big footprint in the area. We didn't need a big, I wanted the smallest footprint as possible for our presence.
Mm-hmm.
So to do that, I thought, well, let's just go ahead and stay at the closest hotel, and we'll make our forays, which really weren't that far, out to where we're doing our work. And we ran a couple different shifts we were doing. So like I said, we were putting in, on average 18-hour days up there. And I think we got excellent coverage. We found lots of stuff. And, like I said, we had a small footprint, so it just wasn't necessary to be camping out there.
And lots of stuff found us, too. Remember
it
that?
Did, that's right.
Whether we wanted them to or not.
So personally, that's my method of doing things. Number one, you got to think also about your team's state of mind. If you got good food, you're able to bathe, you're comfortable when you are sleeping, you got a bed. Because a lot of people get worn out, and T from the military, how being in the field can wear you out after a while just by being out there.
Oh yeah, even not doing very much, you just get tired to the point where you fall asleep trying not to.
Yeah. So like I said, we were able to run 18-hour days. We'd come back in between shifts, and we'd grab a couple hours sleep, and then there was that little gazebo out there, and we'd sit out there and we'd talk, and we had a good time. So everybody's attitude was at a high level.
It was. What did we not do in the gazebo that I think we heard stories
Tom, you got to tell.
Another crew?
Tom, you got to tell the story.
It turned out that the place that we're staying at, the wife of the guy who's the manager, and so the husband and wife managed the place. And anyway, long story short, my wife and her went to school together, so they knew each other. So we went up there and we're just checking the place out, and getting it, kind of doing a little bit of, I guess, recon before the whole team came out there. So we got to chatting with her, and she was like, there was another group of Bigfoot researchers that were on TV. They had a weekly series.
Finding Bigfoot.
Yeah, they never found anything. And she said they would go out there and they would get snocked in that gazebo and then do these howls. and I guess somewhere along the way, I don't remember the whole story, all the details, but I think somebody dressed up in a monkey suit and ran across the highway trying to trick him.
Well, it was somebody's birthday, some local's birthday. So they wanted to, and the person was into Bigfoot, and they knew the Bigfoot finding crew was coming out there. And I think the person who was going to run across the road in the Bigfoot suit the Finding Bigfoot crew was supposed to be in the vehicle behind this person, and somehow they got switched around, so they ran out in front of the Finding Bigfoot group.
Right. And so what did we not do? We didn't get snocked because
no, we weren't drinking.
Do that.
We don't drink in the field.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, I'm not much of a drinker anyway.
No, me neither.
And we didn't. I've never done a howl ever.
And it was the same things they did on the show. That's what it was. They were sitting in this gazebo, drunk off their butts, and they were doing their stupid howls along a busy highway.
Yeah. Okay, so we didn't do that.
No, we did not.
We didn't do that. But it was interesting because the gal she was the manager, her husband managed the place, really nice people. Her and my wife, the three of us were talking, and then she just kind of confided with us, and she goes, have you ever noticed how many people have vanished around here? And I go, it's funny you mention that because I have noticed that.
A lot of it depends on how you behave when you go into an area with people you don't know. And I think it's a lot of the credit of the people on the team. All of us were very professional and, very pleasant with people, locals, and the locals would open up. I mean, I remember we stopped at the gas station there, which is a combination gas station store. And one of the guys with us had come over and said, the attendant there, young guy, just opened up and told him about his encounter. He'd had a recent encounter with one of the creatures up there, and it was kind of like that.
About that, yeah.
Kind of like that. People would just talk to us.
They would, yeah. If you just act like a regular person and you're approachable and you're not snooty because you're a Hollywood celebrity or something. Not saying these guys were, I don't know, I wasn't there, but anyway, yeah, the locals were very nice, and we were very approachable as far as talking about the topic. Yeah. And the other thing is, never ever did any of us go into an area alone. Never.
No, that's true. I mean, it was, we were very careful. Of course, when you have a lot of experience with this topic.
Hello?
There he is.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. It just got very quiet for a minute. I looked at my phone and it was still counting, the phone call, and all of a sudden it just hung up.
Well, sometimes it happens, we get dropped calls, unfortunately. But yeah, we were talking about how you behave with people. I remember years ago, my friend Carlo, who was he was friends with Linda Moulton Howe, and he was into the whole cattle mutilation thing with all of that group. And he'd had a couple of Bigfoot experiences, so he saw an article about me in the local newspapers, and we connected, and he used to go with me whenever I'd go to the field, which was nice because I don't like going alone, and especially these days I won't go alone, but back then, we're talking the 80s, I'd head out and just I wasn't as aware of things as I am today, but we were sitting around talking about how in a restaurant, we used to go to breakfast before we'd head out to the field, and we were sitting there talking one day, and I said, look at all the people in here. And there was maybe 40, 50 people in this restaurant. I said, I wonder how many people sitting here that are locals have had sightings or know someone who does. And I remember thinking, if I don't get up and go ask somebody, I'm never going to know. So I got in the practice, and it's difficult to do, to just go out and talk to somebody that you've never met before and ask them if they've seen Bigfoot. But I started doing that, and I didn't do it giggling or acting silly or shy or anything like that. I just walk up and I say, excuse me, I'm here doing ABC, and, I was just wondering, have you, or do you know someone that's ever seen one of these creatures? And just doing it very seriously. And every single time, either they would pipe up and say, I have, but I've never talked about it. Or they'd say, I know somebody who did. And it was never a situation of derision, never got anybody laughing at me. They were all very serious about it. And if I asked, they would open up.
Well, what it boils down to is people will treat us the way we treat them. They will respond in kind to what our attitude is. And so I found the same thing. If you are very serious about it, there's none of the giggling, or you try to preface it by justifying, what you saw or whatever. Yeah, people will open up. They will respond because they realize, hey, this is a safe conversation. I can do this.
The couple I was talking about earlier that do research around here on their own, just kind of as a hobby. They came got me one day. They said they had a man they wanted me to talk to, and they had gotten in touch with him by one of his nephews talking to them. But anyways, we met the guy. It turned out I knew him. I had worked with him years earlier, and he was older than me. But when we go to talk about it, he gets real serious, and he said, I joke and cut up about a lot of things. He said, but this happened to me and my brother. And then he tells us a story. Him and his older brother had been out hunting on some family land, and they would always park their ATVs in a pasture at the top of a hill where there was a little small patch of woods, and then walk down across the pasture to the bottom end. That's where the deer always hung out, down there on the property, Well, his older brother had killed a deer one day, and he said he heard him shoot, and they hooted back at each other, woo! And, his brother hooted back, yeah, he got one. So he said he starts walking back up to the ATV, and said just as he gets there, his brother comes walking up, so he just got through field dressing the deer, said he's got to get the ATV, said it's too big for him to drag out. So he said he was having problems with something. His bootlace had broken or something. He said he was going to fix that, so he'd be down there in a minute. Well, his brother took on off down there, and he said by the time he got down there in the ATV, said his brother was walking out of the wood line. Said he'd gotten off his ATV, and he was backing out of the wood line. And he jumped on his ATV and said, let's go. And they took off. And he said when they got up to where their truck was, his brother told him, he said, man, there was something down there. He said it was eating the gut pile that I had just cleaned, and said it had that deer by its back legs, squatted down like he was fixing to tote it off. And so it just sit there and looked at him, and then it stood up. And he said it was about 8 foot tall. And I asked him, I said, well, do you think your brother would talk about it? He laughed, and he said, I doubt it. He said, he's not the kind of person that, he said, he said, we can go see him. He said, but I don't know how much good it's going to do. Well, we did. We went and talked to him, and after being there for about an hour or two, he finally opened up and told us and described what he saw. And, he said that he's never hunted on that part of the property again. He said down there, because there's a swamp back down in there. And he said that's where the biggest deer hunting is on all that land our family owns. He said, but I don't go down there anymore. And, he was real reluctant. And I've run into him over the past several years since that happened, and he really don't want to talk about it, So I don't push the issue. I just, hey, how you doing, Miss Johnson, And I heard recently that he's not doing well. He's got cancer, and he's in the hospital right now. So, and he's got to be probably in his late 70s, early 80s now. But yeah, you got to handle them soft. You got to make sure that they know you're not making fun.
Right. Chuck, you've probably experienced this.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, and you definitely got to watch your P's and Q's.
Forrest, what do you think? I mean, you guys had activity out there, what are the people that you deal with, their attitudes about, if somebody were coming there acting one way or another?
How the people would react? You mean the neighbors and such as that?
Well, and like Jessica or other
maybe
people.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding your question here.
Well, when the people that work with you there, like Jessica, when this stuff first started happening, did they just take it at face value, or, would they be reluctant to talk about it?
Well, I mean, she's standing right here, Jessica. She was standing just right here. Here she comes. They want to know whether you took me at face value when I first told you about the Bigfoot. Yeah, she knows me. Can you hear her?
Barely. Get her closer to the microphone.
Oh, okay. Just repeat what you just got through saying.
But yes, it's like, because I've seen some strange things where it's like there's nothing.
I guess there's some things that happened around here that we knew that humans couldn't have accomplished, and plus she knows me, and I think she'll verify. I'm a pretty straightforward person, and I'm not one for giving you BS or anything like that.
Right.
So
no, you're not. Jessica, you also weren't you in the truck when you and Forrest were coming back on the road and you saw the little one in the road?
Yes.
Was that? Yeah.
I was actually driving.
You were driving.
It was,
Tell us a little bit about that.
I didn't get a good look at it. I was trying to make sure I didn't hit it because it was right smack dab in the middle of the road, right on a curve where it's like you can just miss stuff really easily on that curve. And then I had turned on my brights because it was, and all of a sudden it's like, there it was, like, what the?
Yeah, we were all kind of like, what the hey?
Yeah.
If you remember, I was like looking at the deer crossing sign, and it's right on where the road curves there, and it's a soft curve. It's not a real hard curve. It used to be a hard curve, and when they redid this road, they actually widened it out, and that's when they took 3 acres off of my property in the front. And I mean, it was just like it was there. And I mean, I know she was. I don't know if she remembers what she said, but that's exactly what she said. What the? And what the H is what she said. It said, you know, but you know, and we went on. She had slowed down because she had actually seen it in the road before I ever saw it, and she had slowed down.
Well, Jessica, what you got a little bit of a look at it, but what did you see? Because my understanding, it's like you're looking at a chimp in the road. Is that pretty accurate, or?
It was a large lump in the road. No really distinguishing features that I could see, but it was almost, it reminded me of a boulder, because it was just there. And it's like, it didn't look like an animal, but it's like, that ain't no rock. Could it be like, I was thinking, okay, what can it be in my mind? Like, that hog? No, that's not right for a hog. And me and Forrest actually were debating once we turned around, it's like, and it had moved when we had swung around. So it made it interesting. It's like, nope, that's.
Could you see that it was hairy, or did you any distinguishing features like that?
No, I really didn't. I was more focused on the road, making sure I didn't hit it.
Right.
I think I had, from where I was sitting, I think I actually had a better view of the animal, because when I had seen it, and she had started slowing down, and I think that was, I told you I had kind of seen in the periphery of my, when I had swung around from looking at the sign, because I was looking at the sign trying to figure out why in the hell would somebody shoot holes in the deer crossing sign, but, kids being kids around here. I guess that's the only deer they could hit, but the one stationary on the yellow sign. But anyway, so that I think from the angle that I was sitting at, don't you think that I probably got a better look at it?
Yeah.
Because that was what, and it had its face turned away from us. But I mean, I could tell that it was hairy, and probably from her standpoint, like she said it. And I think you even said that it looked like just a black blob in the road. She said, what the H was that? And I said, And that's when I leaned forward and I was hitting on the dash, remember that? And I was like, turn around. And so she did. She pulled a quick U-ey in the middle of the road there, and then we went back, and of course at that point it was gone out of the middle of the road. But then we were looking for it, and that's when I saw it off to the left. She was looking right, and I was looking left, and it was actually to the left of her. And I was like, there it is. And that's when I could actually see, I saw it, running, and it was on all fours at that point in time. And I could tell what it was. There was absolutely no doubt in my mind what it was. But you didn't see it then. You were looking the other way, weren't you? Yeah.
I just saw it that one time while it was in the road.
Yeah. And all I saw it was take like about 2 bounds, and then it made a sharp left and went right up and into my pasture.
Wow. Have you seen any evidence of it since then around your place?
No, not really. We've had instances where we knew something was going on outside because things that we'd heard, and and then the guy sent me that alarm for the door, and of course I had a couple of instances where I had, if you remember, I don't know if I told you this, Will, but I did tell Tom about it. Remember when I had laid down to take a nap, and I had taken a pain pill, and I'm not one for taking pain medication, and I had taken one, and I mean that stuff just knocks me out. I mean, if they're going to come in here and kill me, that's when they need to do it, because I wouldn't even hear them walk in.
I'm the same way.
So I had taken that, closed my bedroom door, and I get up, and my back door was wide open, but Lagatha was out of her kennel, and she was laying right there by the door. So something had happened at that point in time, and I had missed the entire episode.
One of the things
I don't know what it was, or
one of the events that really sticks out in my mind with your place, Forrest, is, if you recall, we were recording one day, and you had to go out. The horses had gotten out, and you'd gone out into the corral, and the horses were heading your direction. And here are you find these great footprints, Sasquatch footprints, right there in the corral. And you took a couple of pictures and sent them.
Yeah.
And then, of course, couldn't do anything with them because horses trampled them all. But that really stuck out in my mind.
I remember that because I was telling you that. I was like, oh, my God, we just found, you were with me that day. When we found we found the prints out there. I had completely forgot about that Will. Yeah, and I'm talking to you, and I was telling you that, and that was when Sam and Sherry were down by the barn. Yeah, and Sherry they were late getting here, so Sam, Sherry, her husband Travis had come out to help, and he was pouring feed out in the pasture. Well, here we look up, and oh my God, here come the horses, and they were like. And here Jessica and I are looking at the prints, and it's a good thing we straightened up when we did, because otherwise we'd have probably been head first in the dirt, because those horses came right through where we were standing. And I was like, oh, my God.
They were great
those
tracks.
Beautiful prints, and they're gone.
Yeah, they were great tracks. I mean.
Yeah, and I think I got 1 or 2 pictures, and that was it.
Yeah, right.
I was like, oh, my gosh.
Isn't that something?
So,
I mean.
Can I ask all of you a question?
Sure.
Just pertaining to tracks?
Sure.
I have heard several times, and in stories I've read, people describing, seeing the adult tracks and then finding smaller tracks, juvenile tracks, close by or in the same area. But several of them said that the smaller tracks looked more like a human foot than the big track did. So the big track, I guess they're talking about that mid-tarsal break.
Well,
do the smaller ones tend to not have that, or not have it as pronounced as an adult?
I don't think that is as much the distinguishing feature is, the overall appearance of the track is different. I think that changes as they grow.
Yeah. I mean,
the T.
Can I jump in here just a second?
Yeah.
Sure.
Tom sent me a picture. Remember that picture you sent me, Tom, of the little footprint?
I did.
And
I was just going to mention that.
I think you're exactly correct there on that, Will. I think that the foot probably does change somewhat, and I won't say metamorphosizes, but I do think that there's probably some physical changes that transpire as they become adults, because you don't see that. It really did look almost like a human print, except I don't know of any baby that could have made a print that deep, nor could one made that wide. Now,
it was very,
I have seen some babies with some big fat feet, but that nothing like that.
Well,
no, the dimensions are totally different.
Well, if you recall, with Jason's tracks in Arizona, we've got hundreds and hundreds of footprints, and that's a large group. The smallest juvie footprint that he took pictures of is probably about 5 inches long, and there's tracks that are up to 20 inches long there. But the juvie tracks, in that soil along the river, if you were to go there, you'd swear those were human footprints, except for the depth. Jason's around 200 pounds, and his boot print would barely make an impression in that soil. And these footprints that are, 10 inches long or so are several inches broken through the crust and into that softer soil underneath. So, but they look very human.
Do you think it could possibly be, as they get older, they get bigger and more weight, it causes their feet to maybe change shape a little the way they walk?
It could be part of how they use their feet too that would make those changes.
I think as they grow and their bones grow, they probably separate some down there on the bottom of the foot.
Talking about where the mid-tarsal break is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I was going to say something. I don't know if you, what you need to do is go out there and look up, excuse me, what people's feet look like, especially in Indonesia, and there's even some of the Amazonian tribes, that these people that never wear shoes and such. And there is a group of people, and excuse me, for some reason the name escapes me, and I was just looking at it the other day, and I meant to send you a picture of it. Their big toe becomes almost like an opposable thumb, like you see on your big great apes, on your chimpanzees. Well, like on any of the lower orders of primates, we're the only ones that have an inline toe, big toe. All the others have an opposable toe, just like we have an opposable big thumb. Well, these people, they are Homo sapiens sapiens. Their big toe almost looks like an opposable big toe because they climb trees a lot, and they use their feet to help them climb trees, and they have developed this big toe is almost has gone off to the inside of their foot. And it's just something that has developed over the years. Because the lady that was holding an infant, the infant's foot looked like a normal infant's foot. So it's something that's developed over the years, and I think it's by the fact that the way they use their feet.
Now, let me tell you a little story. Back when I had my encounter, I used to deliver magazines, and a lot of my customers were, Indians. They run convenience stores, and there was this one particular guy. He was a little older than me. Nice guy, just super nice. Every time I'd come there, he was always trying to feed me, and some of that Indian food's hotter than But anyways, he always wore sandals. He never. I'm talking about it would be 25 degrees outside with sleet and snow, and he'd be walking around in sandals and coming in and just walking around like, wasn't doing. I said something to him about it one day. I said, I don't know how you can walk around without shoes on and stuff like this. And he told me, he spoke really good English, but he had spent most of his life in India, and the region where he lived, he said there's a lot of mountains where he lived. But he said, I can't find shoes that fit. My feet are too wide. And he took off his sandal and held up his foot. And seriously, his foot was twice the width of mine. I mean, really short stubby foot, but his foot was really wide, you know. And he said, you know, where he was from, he said they never wear shoes. They wore sandals or went barefoot, you know. And he said a lot of the walking they had to do to walk from village to village and, you know, places like that, it was up and down mountains. So they were, but, you know, how you were just talking about how that toe was almost pointing off like a thumb. Well, this guy's big toe, it wasn't quite that extreme, but his big toe was actually looked like it was kind of separated from his other 4 toes. And, but he was just explaining that he can't find shoes that fit. You know, I asked him, I said, don't you get cold? He said, oh, yeah, but after a while you get used to it. I'm like, okay, you know. But, yeah, you know, it was an adaptation of where he grew up and where he lived.
Guys, I hate...
Well, I think I've told y'all before, my daughter's husband is half Filipino and half Italian. And she's always teased him about his wide feet. And I told her one day, I said, listen, I said, quit teasing him about his wide feet, because I said, his foot actually looks like a human's foot should look. And I said, because, well, as a child, he ran around barefoot all the time. They didn't put shoes on their kids out there. I don't even care. Even the wealthy people don't stick shoes on their, you know, kids' feet. And I mean, he came from a middle class. You know, his mother was Filipino and his father was Italian. He came from a middle class family there, and so I mean, they just don't wear shoes. I mean, it's just it's a cultural thing. So you know, his feet, all of his toes are nice and in line, and there's a little bit of space between each one, and the foot is nice and wide. Now, that's the way our foot actually should look. And if you look at any of the pictures, like they keep finding all these here just recently in New Mexico, they found pictures of, well, it's actually in the rock. It's fossilized human footprints. And then they find fossilized human footprints in Africa, and they found them all over the world. And if you look at those, that's the way the human foot is. Those people did not wear shoes. The reason our foot looks the way it does is because they, you know, mama slapped shoes on their baby's feet when they're infants, and that causes our little toe to curl under our 4th toe, and then our big toe tends to tuck itself under, under that 2nd toe there, the long, you know, which is usually the longest toe on your foot. And that's the reason our foot looks that way. It's because we wear shoes. It's not because we naturally, if you left our feet alone and if we went around barefoot, every one of us would have feet that look just like everybody, all those native peoples.
All right.
I mean, we might not be climbing trees out there. I can guarantee you we wouldn't be doing that in Texas, not climbing up mesquite trees. But anyway.
Guys, I hate to say it, but we're out of time. Great conversation.
Are you trying to tell me to shut up, Will?
No, we have to move on to other things we're doing. So we're going to wrap this session up, folks. Thanks for stopping by. Everyone on the panel, stand by.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.